So good evening. I'm Werner Ott, and as director of the Goethe-Institut Chicago, let me welcome you to our discussion and book presentation tonight. It is our fourth event this year in the context of German-Jewish dialogue and reconciliation. For the Goethe-Institut, this dialogue is very important. Learning from history, taking a stand today, and building a positive future together has high priority, not only, but especially in German-Jewish relations. Goethe-Institut Chicago started out this year with a book presentation, Heim at Home, with Austrian author Diane Greger, followed by a moving documentary film by Ethan Bensinger, who is here with us tonight. Hello. Stories of the Self-Help Home, followed by a film portrait of Nobel Prize winner Eric Kandel by Petra Seeger. For our discussion tonight, we are privileged to have very distinguished partners. The Action Reconciliation Services for Peace, the American Jewish Committee, and the German Consulate General Chicago. I like to be brief because we have many interesting speakers tonight. First, Mark McGuigan, Director, Action Reconciliation Services for Peace, and John Schweitzer, Acting Director, American Jewish Committee, Chicago. Welcome. And Dr. Christian Brecht, Consul General of the Federal Republic of Germany, welcome, and his wife. And Maya Carmeli, Consul for Public Affairs at the General Consulate of Israel of Chicago, welcome. She will give opening remarks and will be followed by a keynote address on German-Jewish dialogue and reconciliation by Ambassador Reuven Merav, Chair of the Association of Israelis of Central European Origin. Following the keynote, a panel including Agnes Schwartz, Holocaust survivor, Alvin Gillens, author and photographer, and Phil Dunn, American Jewish Committee board member, and Pia Callaway, Action Reconciliation for Peace volunteer at the Self-Help Home in Chicago. They will continue to have a discussion. They will be looking at the current status of this important process and its future. I wish you all an interesting evening, and please welcome with me Mark McGuigan.
Thank you all very much for being here tonight. And yes, so as you already know, my name is Mark McGuigan, and I am the U.S. Program Director for Action Reconciliation Service for Peace. And I would also like to thank our sponsors and our partners today, the American Jewish Committee here in Chicago, the German Consulate General, the Goethe-Institut here in Chicago, of course, and the German Information Center, USA, and also the Israeli Consulate here in Chicago. We are an organization, we're small, but I think a very interesting group, and we really value the partnerships. We really need the partnerships that we're able to build here. And so, again, thank you very much for your support. What is a good Irish Catholic boy like me doing in a German-Jewish dialogue like this? This is, of course, the question that's on all of your minds, and we can get to that later. But let's talk a little bit for a moment about Action Reconciliation Service for Peace, which founded not by Irish Catholics, but rather by German Protestants who, though opponents of the Nazi regime, recognized their own responsibility for what had happened. And through the service of young Germans, sorry, let me make sure I get the right distance to the microphone. Tell me if it's not loud enough. Wanted to set a sign for atonement and peace among the peoples that Germans had so grievously harmed. And since 1958, they've been doing that, and in fact, since 1968 here in the United States. And while as generations pass, we speak less of atonement, although the word remains in the German version of our name, Aktionssinnezeichen, sign of atonement. What distinguishes Action Reconciliation from other service organizations is the grounding of its volunteers' service in the darkest chapter of Germany's history, a commitment to never forget the capacity of humans to do terrible harm to each other, and to accept personal responsibility to work for justice for all and the exclusion of none from society. Our volunteers, and we currently have 170 serving in 13 countries in Europe, 22 serving here in the United States, work with people who have often been excluded in society: the old, the poor, people of color, the homeless, gays, lesbians, and transgendered. They've done community organizing. They've worked for peace organizations, for human rights groups. And we've had, over the years, many volunteers here in the Chicago area working on all of those issues. But the story of Action Reconciliation here in the United States in particular has been about a growing dialogue between Germans and Jews. That has been a major theme for us since the beginning, with our first volunteers serving in Israel since 1963. Here in the United States, that discussion actually took a lot longer to get underway. Our first volunteers arrived in the late 60s, and it wasn't until the middle 80s that the first Jewish organizations were willing to accept placement of volunteers from Action Reconciliation. But since that time, that involvement has grown until approximately half of our volunteers are now placed with Jewish organizations. The majority of those are working on Holocaust issues in one form or another, and approximately 8 or 9 of them are working directly with Holocaust survivors. Those beginnings were tentative and less trustful, but they really have grown, and I think that to say that German-Jewish dialogue forms one of the core functions of our organization here in the United States is hardly an exaggeration. But that work has gone on not only here, but in other places, and has been recorded most recently by the author Al Gillens, who's here with us tonight, in a book that was released this year called Reconciling Lives, where Al, a longtime friend of the organization who lives in Philadelphia, describes the work of several of our volunteers in 4 countries: the United States, England, the Czech Republic, and Israel, working together with survivors, and talks about the relationship, the very special relationship and bond that grows up between the volunteer and the survivor. Did I mention that Al's book is available for purchase today? I just thought I would throw that in. I think that his book comes out at a really important time. This dialogue becomes particularly important as the 3rd generation since the Holocaust reaches adulthood, and the window for today's youth to learn from and comfort the living witnesses of that horror narrows. That creates 2 opportunities that we at Action Reconciliation very much want to grasp: the opportunity for our volunteers to know those witnesses, and also the opportunity for them to meet their own compatriots of their own age in the Jewish community and get to know Jews as living individuals and not merely to engage with the history of the Holocaust. In the coming years, we would like to expand those dialogues. We'd like to expand our work in this area, and as I said, we've been here in Chicago for some time, but we hope to see more of our volunteers here in the coming years to work on these issues. We also are always looking for friends who want to support us in our work, and we invite you to be those friends, to come and support us in mentoring our volunteers and in other ways. And I'll be here, of course, afterwards, as will my colleague Katharina von Munster, who I want to mention, who has been really the driving force in organizing these talks, and also is the former director of our program in Israel, so she brings also the perspective of our Israeli program to the table. And so please feel free to come up and talk to us after the program is over if you have questions. I think that that's pretty much all that I want to say. I think there are other people who would echo the statements of the director, that there are other people who have some very interesting things to say. So I would like to actually bring up one after the other, the 2 general consuls, Dr. Christian Brecht, the general consul of Germany here in Chicago, and Maya Carmeli, consul for public affairs at the General Consulate of Israel, here also in Chicago. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, esteemed guests. I am very grateful to be part of this event tonight, and I would like to welcome everybody along with our partners. I would like to welcome warmly our panelists and especially the Israeli ambassador, Mr. Reuven Merhav. Tonight, we meet individuals from very different walks of life who can each bring their own experience to the panel. This form of dialogue helps us to not only remember the past, but to unite in order to work on a better and on a more peaceful tomorrow. Now, as it has been said, is the last chance for the victims of the Holocaust to tell their stories. And against this background, the Action Reconciliation Service for Peace offers young German volunteers a unique opportunity to interact with Holocaust survivors and thereby ensure that the acts and the atrocities of the past are not forgotten. As is evident by Mr. Gielen's book, Reconciling Lives, the volunteers are really making the most of this experience. One volunteer is with us tonight, and Ms. Pia will be able to give us more insight into the program and convey her own experiences. Thank you, Pia, for being here. With their work, these volunteers help to keep the memory of the Holocaust survivors alive and help very much to strengthen German-Jewish relationship in the future. I also aim to contribute to this objective with tonight's event. I look forward to an evening of an interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm very honored to be here today on behalf of the Israeli Consulate. In the last month, we just commemorated the Holocaust Day in Israel and in the United States, and I attended different events about the Holocaust. In all of them, as Mark mentioned before, the message that was reiterated over and over again is never forget. When I was invited to make some remarks in this event, it was very interesting for me because of the very interesting perspective of discussing the lessons of the Holocaust while discussing the future dialogue and reconciliation. And when I think about reconciliation, growing up in Israel, I remember times that there were families that didn't want anything to do with Germany. They didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to buy anything from Germany. They didn't want to really think about any form of dialogue. When I grew up and I was in high school, I actually encountered other programs such as youth delegations, sister cities, different programs to bring youth together and discuss how there could be some collaborations. Nowadays, it's completely different. There are different collaborations on different levels, from the people to the countries, and we're discussing and keep discussing how never to forget, but how we're able to really cultivate a dialogue. That's why I'm particularly anticipating the discussion tonight, because I do think that there are very interesting things. And I thank everyone who has created this event for inviting me, also because I can listen for personal. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for tonight. Ambassador Reuven Merhav is a man who's had quite a remarkable career, has served the State of Israel for most of his professional life in a number of different important capacities. Born of German-Jewish parents in Haifa, and so having a very strong family connection back to Germany, he nonetheless, as he told me today at the airport, at a very early age, recognized the career path that he was going to set out upon, and then pursued it, working with the security services and then later in the foreign ministry, where over the course of many years, he was involved in such projects as the rescue of the Ethiopian Jews. He was ambassador to Hong Kong, and then later also helped open relations between Israel and the People's Republic of China. he has known our organization and our volunteers for quite some time in Israel, and today he serves as president of the Council of Israelis of Central European origin, and brings that perspective to the table as well. What can I say? I just want to very much welcome, and we are very honored to have with us tonight Ambassador Mechav.
Welcome everyone, and I thank the partners of this who arranged this very important event. I wish to say that I'm here in my personal capacity, although I am an activist in the Association of Israelis of Central European origin. The relations with Germany and whatever has to do with it is the individual matter left to the discretion of every member. Because even at this day and age, there are very few people, though, who say that this shouldn't be done officially. People should let the state do what it wants, let all the official agencies do what they have to do. We can deal on an individual basis, and our slogan is very simple. Unsere Wurzeln sind dort und wir leben hier. Our roots are in Germany and we are here. And we are very deeply rooted in Germany in the sense that our education was a symbiotic one. We grew up, my generation, even half a generation after me, in households where inside it was Germany or Central Europe, outside it was completely Middle Eastern, entirely different. We grew up bilingually. Inside there were Tischmanieren, there was Pünktlich, there were pictures, there were books, there were all these things which were strongly representing the bonds to Germany. Outside it was a general atmosphere of the young Jewish community of Palestine striving to become a state. However, having followed the relationship between Israel and Germany for many, many years, though I never served in Germany, the evolution of this relationship is a unique chapter in modern history. It is a unique chapter in the sense that it seems that within a very short period of time, great things have been achieved. They have been achieved because of an extraordinary geopolitical juxtaposition in which young Germany, going through a very serious process of democratization, was finding its way to the family of nations, and the young state of Israel, which came about after many years of great struggle by pioneers, by people who fought very hard to reclaim the country and to bring in the people from all over the world, were at a crossroad because there were hundreds of thousands of Holocaust survivors streaming in from Europe. There were hundreds of thousands of penniless people coming from Arab countries from which they were evicted. The country was in a deep crisis. And we had the understanding, one giant leader who declared the state of Israel, Ben-Gurion, had a meeting of a mind with the great leader of Germany, Konrad Adenauer. And these two people, although they haven't met until 1960, they created this kind of rapport which made this meeting of minds and of interests possible. It ended not only in the question of reparation and compensation, which was very important, and at the time, looking back, the agreement that was signed, the Luxembourg Agreement that was signed in September of 1952, were an injection of life to the very weak and poverty-stricken economy of Israel. It enabled young Israel to create an infrastructure, to build roads, to pave way for education for hundreds of thousands of people who were flocking in, to build housing, because until then, or still at that time, people were living in tents or in shacks in very bad conditions. And all this enabled the state of Israel to uplift itself, to become slowly a modernized state, using its brains, its potential, its possibilities, and banking on that help from Germany, which came in goods, it didn't come in money. At the same time, slowly bridges were built between Israelis and Germans. It would be interesting to note that the people who were doing this work in Bonn, most of them belonged to one generation before me or two generations before me in the German-speaking community. There were people who were holding important positions in the German economy, who were Zionists, who left Germany out of conviction and out of a mixture of conviction and dire straits. And these people knew how to negotiate, understood the German narrative, got the respect of the German counterparts, and it was a great achievement in the sense that for 12 years goods were flowing into Israel with a complete, neat, as you would call it, household. Nothing was embezzled. The whole thing went on a very clean basis, and everyone, even those who then opposed it, would agree today that it was important. Ben-Gurion said he's willing to undertake to carry the burden of the state needs to get support from Germany. But he cannot, and for this he's willing to pay a political price, which was a very strong opposition, assaults on the Knesset, on the parliament, very violent demonstrations, but he said this he can survive. But as far as the personal compensation or reparation are concerned, he said this is the role of the Jewish people, and in cooperation or in collaboration with the Jewish organizations, a conference was established in '51, which is called the Claims Conference. Incidentally, I was sent by my organization along with a member of my counterpart in the American Federation of Jews of German origin to serve on the board of that claims conference, where I am the chairman of the executive committee. And for years, this body has negotiated with the Germans on an incremental basis, on an honest basis, on a professional basis, with a great deal of mutual understanding, what we call a small measure of justice. A small measure of justice, because no one can ever compensate what happened during the war. No one can ever compensate the loss of life. No one can ever compensate the loss of the hundreds or thousands of Einsteins and of engineers and of scientists, of people, of the human richness that went bust, including, of course, the young brains of 1.5 million kids. No one can ever compensate for that. But we can come to terms with the reality in the sense that we try to build bridges to the future. And in that respect, there were beginnings from the German side already in the 50s, even before Aktion Söhnezeichen. There was a small Deutsch-Israelische Studiengruppe. They were active in the mid-50s in universities. Germany was then hesitant to have diplomatic relations with Israel because of the Hallstein Doctrine, because then there was East Germany, and the East German said it was connected with the Arab world. Today it sounds like a fantasy, but that's the way it prevailed then. It was only in '65 that Israel and Germany have concluded the diplomatic relations. But this confidence-building measures which were launched from bottom to top by students, by youngsters, by the Protestant Church, by others, was a very important and significant step, because it showed that it comes from within, that it is genuine. And it is this reason why I am here. I'm not here because I was delegated to do so. I'm not here because anybody pays me. I'm not here because I'm here out of respect to the work of the ASF. And everything is personal, because I had an old aunt. She passed away in the year 2003. She was 97 years old. And when she turned 94, she became sort of very frail. And when I came to the sheltered home where she was living, I saw a young man, not very Israeli looking, taking care of her. I was wondering who was that. I was told he is from the ASF. I learned about the organization, and I found out on a personal basis what my colleague here, Mr. Gillen, has found in his very interesting book, the personal rapport between young people who come out of a very clean conscience, out of human interest, to take care of people with whom they never had any contact. And I can't forget in how emotional, in what an emotional way my aunt, who was, they used to call her the last Prussian in the family, was when she was speaking about that young guy and how she described how he takes care of her, and the conversations they had, because they would sit for hours and speak, and she would tell him about her experiences in the First World War. Some friends have heard it already, when the teacher would come into the class and all the girls in the Lyceum would stand up, rise and say, Gott strafe England, Gott strafe Frankreich. So patriotic they were. And her elder brother, of that aunt, my father, served on the Russian front. In 1916, Ludendorff, at the pressure of anti-Semitic circles, initiated the Jews census to show that the Jews don't serve at the army. In 1916, out of 600,000 Jews in Germany, 100,000 had served in the army, 12,000 were already dead. This sent a shockwave among these young soldiers, and this turned many of them, who came already from very assimilated family, into staunch Zionists. And this is how my father became a Zionist. And when he came back from the service, and he studied, and he got permission to study faster, he finished medicine in 4 or 5 years, the Zionist movement sent him to other universities, to Breslau, to Munich, to Berlin, where he was activist, and he understood that the only way for us to live independent lives and to carry our heritage in the way we want to is to live in the land of Zion. It would sound funny to you, be Israeli from Jerusalem, saying this here in Chicago, but we accept, of course, today the fact that 45 or 42% of the Jewish people are in America, 45 are in Israel, the rest are in France, Britain, or whatever. But one thing is for sure. Since there is a state of Israel, what happened in the Second World War can never happen again. Can never happen again. That's the best assurance for the existence of the Jewish people, despite all the difficulties. Of course, American Jewry, with all its clout and its political support and its strength and its wealth, is extremely important. It's a very important ally, no doubt about that. But there is no question that the state of Israel as such is there to stay, and it is strongly connected with our tradition, with what we have said before, with the liberty. And we are now a few weeks after Pesach, after the Passover, when every Jew says, in every year, every Jew should regard himself as if he was liberated from Egypt. And this we repeat every year in the text which we read, because the liberty of the human being, the liberty of the human soul, the liberty of thinking. This is the essence of the human being. And if you add to that the basic values which are already there in the Bible, the Shabbat and all these things which came over to the Judeo-Christian tradition, you have the whole Western world. And this is what gives us a lot of pride. This is what makes us real partners of the United States and of Germany of today. I want to make one last remark. Over the years, what has evolved is a unique tripartite relationship between Germany, Israel, and the United States. And we enjoy a relation which is not a special relation. It is a unique relation. Very few countries in the world enjoy a unique relationship with America. Britain, Canada, of course. I would find it very hard to name many more. But the relationship with Israel is unique. The same goes for the relationship between the United States and Germany, for obvious reasons, because it was for the United States that the rehabilitation and democratization of Germany became possible in a very astute way, which was done in a very careful and intelligent way in the 40s, leading to the Constitution and to the new Germany, and of course, what happened afterwards. And then, now we come to the relationship between Israel and Germany. It is, of course, a good relationship. It is a special relationship, but it is a unique relationship. It doesn't say that we don't have differences. It doesn't say that the Germans have to say amen for everything we do, including some stupid mistakes of politicians everywhere, anywhere. This happens. But we deal with an establishment, or with the public, most of whom understand that they have no guilt, but they have responsibility, that these things don't occur, and these things should be cleared only on the basis of a very open and direct dialogue. And I think it is what we see here today exemplifies this very unique relationship. Because what do we have here? The partnership of the Goethe-Institut, the German consulate, the Israeli consulate, the American Jewish Committee, and the ASF, and the German establishment, and the Israeli establishment. So this is a unique relationship. I'm sure it will prevail because it is based not on moving sands, it is based on reality, on real values. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mechaf. Again, we're very honored to have you here and very happy to have your remarks, and thank you again. We want to turn now to a panel discussion around the topic of the future of reconciliation issues and German-Jewish dialogue. And so I'd like to invite our panelists to come up and join me here at the front of the stage. I want to thank everybody again for coming and for our participants tonight. And I want to give just a brief introduction before we get going with our discussion. To my left is Agnes Schwartz. And Agnes is a survivor. She was born in Hungary and was hidden as a child. Lost many of her relatives under various circumstances to the Holocaust. Her father survived, actually, due to the help of Raoul Wallenberg. And because she was hidden, and successfully so, she's here with us today. She also has had the chance to meet many of our volunteers here in Chicago. And so thank you very much for coming and welcome.
Thank you.
To my right is Pia Kulhavi, and Pia is a current volunteer here with Action Reconciliation Service for Peace. She's been serving at the Self-Help Home for the Aged, which is a home for the elderly founded by Holocaust survivors for Holocaust survivors. And she organizes a variety of activities there, including, I believe, teaching folks how to use computers, and exercise, and concerts, and trips, and various things. And I think she can very well represent the experience that many of our volunteers have here in the United States. Further to my right is Al Gillens, who I mentioned earlier, and Al is, of course, the author of the book Reconciling Lives, and as a result, and frankly, after 20 years of interaction with us at Action Reconciliation in Philadelphia, he actually has a long-time connection to our volunteer program, in addition to having then very intensively worked with these volunteers in 2010. He has worked in the past basically for the United Jewish Appeal, the Jewish Federation, where he was campaign director in the greater Philadelphia area, and worked again with the United Jewish Appeal, directing overseas trips to Israel and connecting, I think, with very interesting and important people over there, and so has been a real bridge builder. And so again, we welcome you and thank you for coming and for everything you've done. And then finally, on my furthest right, is Phil Dunn. And Phil is a board member of the American Jewish Committee of Chicago, and is a consultant in the field of communications and in the healthcare field, and fairly recently, in May, participated in an exchange to Germany through the Adenauer Foundation, which operates one of several of these exchanges that try and bring young Jews and Germans together to have, again, these kind of discussions that we're having right now. And so thank you again all, and I think that what we want to do right now is simply give each of them a chance to talk about their perspectives on the issue of reconciliation and its future. So Agnes, if you'd like to start.
Thank you very much. I've come full circle, I think, on this issue. For 50 years, nobody wanted to talk about the Holocaust, including my mother's family who lived in Chicago.
Oh, if you could lift the microphone up closer to you.
Okay, I'm sorry. For 50 years, nobody wanted to talk about the Holocaust. Nobody wanted to listen. I wanted to talk, but nobody wanted to hear it. And then one of my grandchildren, who was in 8th grade at the time, came up to me one day and said, "Grandma, we're studying the Holocaust. Would you come to my school and speak?" And I said I had to sleep on it, but I did agree to go, and that was the beginning of my speaking out. And now I speak all the time on behalf of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. I just came back from Springfield, where I spoke at the Capitol, and I very much appreciate Governor Quinn's interest in the Jewish community. Anyhow, I had a terrible fear of Germany, which slowly has dissipated. Many years ago, when my children were still small, I had to go up to the German consulate to sign a piece of paper. And to me, it was like being in Nazi Germany. I couldn't, not that anybody was mean to me, but it was like a brick on my chest. I couldn't wait to get out of there and be out in the fresh air. As you said, I lost my whole family. My mother, my father survived, but he was not the same father as he was before. He brought me to the United States and left me here with my mother's 2 sisters. I was in a strange country with strange people with a strange language. I was robbed of my childhood. Then through the museum and through ARSP, I became acquainted with some young Germans. And one of them was the year, I have a friend who lived there right across the street from the old museum. And she used to invite him over and give him lunch and let him spend cold winter nights at her house. And I said to her, what's the matter with you? You're sleeping with the enemy. And then I got to know Gregor. And Gregor and I, this was many years ago, he's coming back to the United States, and we're dear friends. And because of him, slowly, I changed my mind. I realized that today's young German people hate the Nazis almost as much as I do. I still don't want to be on German soil, but I accept it, that the country has made truly a tremendous step forward, and I wish that all over the world there would be no more genocides, because it's just nothing but hate. And Gregor's grandma and my friend Magda and I, we correspond, we send each other gifts, and it has become a wonderful relationship. As a matter of fact, I had written an article years ago about how I changed my mind. It was published in the Skokie Review. And if anybody's interested, I made a couple of copies of it. So I've come a long ways. And I have to tell you, a couple years ago, I went to Israel. And my plane, I went on Lufthansa. And my plane stopped in Frankfurt. And my heart started to race. I'm in Germany. I don't want to be in Germany. The couple I went with, I happen to be very religious Jews. And she points out there's a vending machine. It says kosher. And there's a gentleman in the airport who must have lost a parent and wants to say a prayer, and he needs 10 men. And he asked, could I have 10 men for a minyan? And in 2 seconds, he had 10 men with yarmulkes, and that, I'm going to cry again. That brought me to tears. And I think that's kind of closed the circle for me.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about this. My life could have been better all my life because my decisions were based on my needs as a result of a loss of a family. And I made some poor decisions early in my life, but in spite of everything, I've raised 3 children, and I have 4 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren today.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. I have a question for you, which is you raised 3 children, you have many grandchildren. Is their relationship with Germans in Germany substantially different than yours, or?
Oh, I don't think they even question it. My grandchildren ask more about what happened. They seem to be much more interested in my speaking out, and I speak all the time now. And I send them recordings and whatnot. So, newspaper articles, and they seem much more anxious to hear about it than my children. I think they have accepted it more. And they're 31 through 33 through 26. So that generation seems to accept it better than my own children who are 45 to 50.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pia, don't think of me as your boss. Think of me as your interviewer. If you could talk a little bit about your experiences, and you're coming at it, of course, from a different perspective. As a young German volunteer here, working with people, many in Agnes's generation and many who've had similar experiences. And how has that experience been for you?
Okay, maybe I just start giving you an insight of my daily work. So I work and live in a Jewish retirement home, in the self-help home, which was, somebody spoke about it before, I guess. Every morning starts with the exercise program. Afterwards, I teach the computer lessons, and I visit individual residents in their apartments. And of course, there are 2 things I deal with. It's the age, and it's the Holocaust past. And both of it isn't that easy. So it took me a while to get into it, and it took me a while to get closer to those people. But it's now, after being there for 6 months already, or 7 months, I would say I have a very good relationship to mostly all of them. And the both of us feel how important it is to, talking about the past, because I probably, not only probably, I belong to the last generation who's able to listen to those stories, and it's the last opportunity to tell their stories. So that's what we do. I listen and they talk. And that's, of course, hard for both of us. It's interesting, though, and I think it's very important. I think what I can do afterwards is, maybe I'll be once the one telling my grandchildren about it. So if they aren't there anymore, I'll be the one talking about it. And that's our responsibility today, I guess, so of being German, just to keeping it in mind and, well, yeah, that it's never be forgotten. So.
Growing up, did you have much exposure to the Jewish community in Germany? And what has your been exposure here, and how has that affected you?
We just spoke about it on our seminar. We had 1 week ago. We had a seminar with all the volunteers in Washington, D.C. So all of us came together. We are 21, and all of us came together in Washington, and we spoke about this. And all of us said it's, I mean, there is Jewish life today in Germany, but sometimes you really have to search for it. It's not that obvious that it is here in the United States. So since I'm here, I really had the first time the possibility to meet Jews in my age, to really get close with them, to be just normal friends with them, and don't talk about or don't have the Holocaust all the time in mind. It's just a normal relationship, a normal friendship. I think we had a very nice event during the seminar in Washington. We had a Shabbat dinner with all of our volunteers, together with a few Jewish students, young people, older people. I don't know exactly what their professions were, but there was a very nice event, just coming together, just talking about normal issues, about, well, daily stuff. And I think this is just very important, that you always keep the Holocaust in mind, but also can develop friendships to between Jews and Christians or Germans today. So, and this is, for me, it was the first opportunity to do that in the United States, but I think it's important to do it in Germany as well. So we really have to work on this as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
May I say something?
Absolutely.
I have asked all the volunteers, and I've known at least 5 or 6 now, if they knew any Jews in Germany, and their answer was always no.
Yeah. And I think that's not atypical. There are many Jews in Germany today, over 200,000, and there's been in-migration of many Russian Jews.
Yes.
But I think that they tend to be concentrated in certain places, and if you're not there, that your opportunity to actually encounter them is still relatively limited. I mean, in a country of almost 80 million people. So, yeah, I think that is one of the unique things about our program, and one of the things that I really love seeing. Many of the volunteers that are working with Jewish organizations have that experience. They have the opportunity to go to Shabbat, you know, and experience that, to experience ritual, but also then on the personal level to meet people in their own age as well as intergenerationally. And I have time and time again seen it really move people and change. Not that they come thinking bad things about Jews, but being exposed to that in real time, in reality, still, it opens your heart in, I think, important ways. Al, I'm going to skip you for the moment and come back to you, no offense. And I want to actually have Phil talk for a minute, because Phil has had something of the opposite experience, going to Germany and interacting with a younger generation of Germans.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to our hosts, to the Goethe-Institut, and to the panelists. Mrs. Schwartz, I'm humbled to be in your presence.
Oh, thank you.
My generation has had everything, and your generation lost everything.
Well, I lost my childhood, that's for sure.
You lost everything, and it is humbling to me to be here. And Pia, your story is terrific. We have a very bright future, and I think that you represent that future.
Yes.
And the work that you do is very important. For those of you who may not know the American Jewish Committee, it was founded in 1906 here in the States, in New York, by Jews largely of German descent who were concerned about pogroms in Russia. And AJC has long been interested in and concerned with Jewish communities worldwide, Jewish communities at risk. AJC was one of the first organizations to raise a flag about the growing anti-Semitism in Germany, even in the 1920s. We said, hey, the Nazis are serious. After the war, AJC was on the ground almost immediately. The war concluded in the spring of 1945 in Europe. By the end of 1945, AJC was on the ground assessing what needed to be done, handling the issues of displaced persons. So AJC has a long history of involvement with Germany, and that involvement continues to this day. So why was I there? Jewish kid from the suburbs, growing up in the 70s and 80s. What did Germany mean to me? Well, pretty much nothing, and it wasn't of interest. We knew that a bad thing had been done, and we didn't really want anything to do with it. To the extent, I can still recall my grandmother, who declared that she wouldn't ride in a German car, would not wear a thread of German clothing, and so forth. And these attitudes really pervaded my childhood. A year ago, I guess about 18 months or so ago now, I got a call from AJC asking me if I would like to join the Adenauer Exchange Program. The Adenauer Exchange Program is a program. It's a partnership between the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and the American Jewish Committee, in which groups of young Germans come to the United States to see Jewish communities and meet Jewish people, and we send a delegation to Germany every year. Did I want to go? Not so much. It wasn't really of interest to me, and, well, you know, a bad thing happened, or a series of bad things happened, and I didn't want to go, but I went. And I have to tell you that it was an eye-opener. It was even life-changing. And what I found was that, first of all, Germany is doing a lot of things right. Just in general, in the way Germany conducts itself on the world stage. It's an economic leader, it's a cultural leader, things like land management and green development. Germany does so many things that are admirable. But beyond that, Germans that we met with, and we met with a wide cross-section of people, seem to embrace this concept without putting the words on it that I would put on. In Judaism, we have a concept that we call tikkun olam, which is repair of the world. It is understanding that the world is fundamentally always a little bit broken, or at least a little bit broken, and that it is our duty to do what we can in some small way to repair it. And I never once heard a German use the term tikkun olam, but that's very much what I saw in Germany, was a great deal of tikkun olam, a great deal of Germans understanding their past, not apologizing for things that had been done by people long ago, but by accepting the fact that, and I believe that Ambassador Merhav, you drew the distinction before between blame and responsibility. There is an embrace of responsibility that I saw and was thrilled to see. And now I can't wait to go back. And now I can't wait to bring my children back. Because I think that Germany has a lesson for us in the world as to, if you mess up, if something goes really, really wrong, that's not it. There is repair to be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Al, I want to come back to you. The place of honor, and perhaps you could talk about your experience with ARSP and our volunteers, and specifically about your experience in putting together the book.
Well, I have to say, to begin with, that Agnes is the reason that I wrote the book.
And I must buy one. I've written a book too, and it has a chapter on it on the ARSP people I've met. I call it Friends Over the Ocean.
It is because of the story that she first told about that first contact with a young German who came to listen. A story that I also heard in Philadelphia a a dozen years ago and realized that with over 15,000 volunteers through the years from ARSP in the multitude of countries that they have worked, each one of them has a story. And each one of those stories has its own story. Agnes has her story from the beginning and from the several volunteers that followed that first one. Pia is creating her story now. And those are the stories that my feeling was need to be told to a wider world. Not just the 15,000 people when they go home, not just to their parents or their friends, but to a wider world. There are those of you sitting out there tonight who are undoubtedly hearing about ARSP and the volunteer program for the first time. My guess is now it won't be for the last time, that these are stories that you will also carry with you. And when Pia made the comment about listening to the survivors at self-help, that is the essence of many of the stories that I heard from the survivors. Let me tell you one briefly. His name is Václav Plesady, and he lived in a little town in Czechoslovakia that was near a little town by the name of Ústí nad Labem. And Ústí nad Labem is on the Elbe River. And one day the German army crossed that river and took Mr. Plesady and the other 19 to 22-year-old young men that were living or working in Ústí and took them back to Germany. Václav was not Jewish. If he was, he probably would not have been in a position to tell me his story. But he was young and strong, and he could work in a factory. And that's exactly what he did for 5 years. He came back, ultimately, at the end of the war. He came back to Ústí. He came back to survivors of his family. He came back to friends. And he had this group of stories, a German girlfriend, a period when he was in prison and didn't think that he would live through it, a period of supervising others in factory work. He had these stories 5 years of his life. And after a day or two or three, he had nobody to tell those stories to, because his friends or his family either had gone through the same circumstances or simply weren't interested in listening to him. In 2009, 60 years after he returned to Ústí, a young German was sent by ARSP to befriend survivors of the Holocaust or of slave labor in Ústí nad Labem, the first time that a German young man or woman, volunteer, had been there. And he came to Mr. Plesady, and Václav was overjoyed to have somebody, especially a German, come to listen to him. And when they parted company after the volunteer's year of service, it was the same feeling that Agnes had after that first volunteer was with her for a year. There were tears in the parting. That's why I wrote the book, because of those stories, because of the changes that took place and take place today amongst the volunteers amongst the survivors, and even amongst the agencies through which the survivors work. Self-help, other organizations in Chicago, the United States, Israel, and 13 countries. And even those agencies are affected by what the volunteer brings to the agency, what the volunteer brings to the survivor. Thoughts and listening.
Thank you, Al, very, very much. I think what we'd like to do is open up the floor to some questions in case folks would like to pose some questions to our panel. And there's a microphone coming up behind you.
In the meantime, I had the good fortune of meeting our current volunteers, Anna Magdalena's father and brother, who were here visiting from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They're a delightful family. And I truly never gave it a second thought that I was entertaining Germans. It
Yeah.
was just meeting people who were very, very pleasant to spend time with.
Today we have two volunteers in Chicago, and one of them is sitting in front of you, of course, Pia, and the other is quietly sitting in the audience and will now hide when I point her out, but Anna Magdalena is right there, and she's serving with the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, which is why she knows Agnes and has had that opportunity as well to interact. I'll give one more chance for questions. Sir.
I have one question for Pia. My name is Mark Backrack. I've had relatives living at the self-help home, and in 1976, I was the only Jewish student at the University of Tübingen. I was 21 years old. At that time, it struck me that the textbooks that were written about World War II really didn't say much about the Holocaust. And the students I had met in 76 either went out of their way to avoid me, truthfully, or they went out of their way to be as friendly and helpful as possible. How has the high school age group been educated in that time? How would they react today if they would find a Jewish student their age coming to visit them?
How they would react, or okay. So first of all, I think it's different now how we learn about the Holocaust in school. We just discussed this in the group of the volunteers as well. And we really learn much about the past. We learn how everything happened, how Jewish life was during this time or even wasn't after a certain time. And I think I really have to think about your question now, because like I said, there is Jewish life today in Germany, but it's not that obvious. So you really have to search for it in a certain way. And I think it would just be interesting for people of my generation, for friends of mine, because that's what I realize right now, that it's just possible to have Jewish friends without having the Holocaust background all the time with us. So of course everybody still remembers it, but you don't have to, I mean, there's nobody being sorry all the time, or nobody who, I don't know, is mad about the other person. It's just a normal friendship going on, and you can just talk and discuss about politics, about sports, about whatever. And I think it would be really interesting for people in my generation to meet Jewish people in their age. And this is what we really have to work on now, after dealing with the past, dealing with the present. I think this is the most important thing.
If I could just chime in. One of the more interesting days that we spent in Germany, we went to Buchenwald in the morning. And that was obviously moving on its own. But one of the interesting things that we saw was the number of high school groups that came through Buchenwald, and it was bus after bus that was were coming in to see it, and we got to meet the chief educators there, and they spent a good deal of time talking to us about the education programs that they have to address the actual history that occurred in the camps. Following that, we had lunch with some tolerance educators who spent a good deal of time talking to us about the importance of tolerance education, what that consists of in Germany, and the challenges that they face, because that's all almost swimming upstream, because what is downstream is the latent anti-Semitism that still exists and is not unique to Germany by any means. It is a worldwide sickness that it manifests all over, including in Germany. It manifests in Germany with the growth of certain political parties. We don't need to get into that here. But the tolerance education is really fighting that and fighting it head on. It's a battle, and I don't think that anybody in Germany would tell you that it's an easy battle, but it's being fought, and it's being fought bravely.
I'd like to add just a little side note, actually, Phil, regarding Buchenwald, because when you were there and studying or able to take part in these programs that they're now doing, I was there to photograph when Germany was still divided. There weren't programs at that time of tolerance, and there weren't indications that Buchenwald was a center for Jews. It was altogether different. The only notation of Jews was was a site of a former barracks, and other than that, it was capitalism and communism. So Germany has changed radically in that direction as well.
Hi, my name is Allison Schmidt, and I actually was the first American volunteer to work back in 1997 for Aktion Sühnezeichen. Now there are about 2 of us that go each year, and what was supposed to be a 2-year stay in Berlin ended up to being 11 years, and I actually worked as one of those tolerance educators after my volunteer service was over. Excuse me, I don't do much public speaking, but I wanted to say that I spent 3 years developing curriculum and teaching junior high students in East Berlin, in Brandenburg, and it was very difficult, I'll be honest. Not because of lack of funding. The German government, I mean, there was plenty of funding there, which was fantastic. I never had to worry about my next grant not coming through. But the lack of knowledge and awareness on some of the students, it was pretty shocking. And I think I couldn't really understand that because, you know, I'd spent so much time in West Germany. I'd actually graduated from a West German university, and I didn't really understand why this pocket, you know, so close to Berlin, which is just a huge island of multiculturalism, and it was beautiful. But then you get into these pockets, these very small pockets where there are still neo-Nazi attacks, and I know no one really likes to talk about that, but it happens, and it happens all the time in Germany today. And I think part of that comes from just a different awareness of the past between the East and the West, and I think the East kind of thought that they had been anti-capitalist and they had nothing to do with the Holocaust, and all the Nazis after World War II, they fled to the West, and the East was like this paragon of, you know, we're socialists and we have nothing to do with that. And I think West Germany has made huge strides in terms of their textbooks, what they're teaching kids, organizations, but there's still a lot of work to be done in East Germany. And I call it East Germany because, I mean, I lived there for 11 years, and that's very much what I saw. But there's a lot of work to be done, and it's pretty difficult. And, you know, as an American, it was hard because who am I, you know, to talk about racism and anti-Semitism when, you know, look where we come from, look at our own history. But I can tell you that they're doing a lot, but there's a lot of work left to be done.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think it's always easy to assemble a panel where we say very lovely and nice things, and I think that it's very important to keep in mind that this dialogue has not been easy for very sound reasons, and even today, 3 generations after the Holocaust, it's not a completely done deal. There's a lot of work to be done. Agnes, you wanted to?
I was in Hillsboro, Illinois, which is a small farming town in southern Illinois. I spoke at a high school. And the young man, after I talked, came up to me and said, my family took me to Germany. And do you know that they don't teach the Holocaust in Germany? And I said to him, to the best of my knowledge, that is not true. That yes, I was there and they don't teach it. So how can we convince Americans that this is being done in Germany?
Yeah.
And he was not a Jewish boy.
Yeah. Is there another question? Yeah, please.
Actually, just to follow up, I'm Jane Ramsey, the retired director of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs. We have a long 25-year history with ARSP, so it's very dear to my heart and our members. A few years ago, many of us traveled to Berlin for the 50th anniversary of ARSP. I wish I could say it in German.
It's okay.
And I was deeply moved, and our board and members were moved, and we had some people from grassroots community organizations, not Jewish, actually from the Mexican community who traveled with us. We spent time in the synagogue, which was was deeply moving to me. As a young Jew who grew up with a father who was one of those people who said, I don't buy German chocolate cake, and so really the fear that we brought with us. So the experience and the recognition over the years of how Germany is grappling with anti-Semitism has been deeply significant to us. But we are aware of some of the issues that we're talking about now. I don't want to be romantic when we talk to our folks, that there are still those deep issues in, not just in Germany, but we're talking about in Germany today, as there are deep fears still in our community. So I guess my question is, how do we honestly talk about the realities still of what we need to do yet together in both Germany, relative to the anti-Semitism and bigotry that still exists, and in our community relative to the fears and stereotype or perceptions that there has not been movement when there has.
There's someone, I get the sense, Agnes, maybe you want to start?
No,
Oh?
I hear that Hungary is extremely anti-Semitic again. It's probably the most anti-Semitic country in Europe right now. And they have a very right-wing government. And my question is, why are there still any Jews left in Hungary? If the circumstances are that way, then why are you there? Leave. But it's easier said than done. I mean, people have raised families, and this is a 3rd generation. But the anti-Semitism is very, very persistent there. And they want to count again how many Jews there are in the parliament and whatnot. Well, that's the way we started with the Nazis, so let's not go backwards.
We were speaking of anti-Semitism and really anti-immigrant feelings all across Europe. And it's not unique to Europe, but it is acute in Europe. It's very strong here. It's strong, look, everywhere. The rise of Golden Dawn in Greece, Hungary has a real problem, the NPD in Germany, of course. These parties are organized. These people exist, and they're out in the open, and they have to be confronted. There are legal tools in Germany and in other European countries to deal with them. I'm not certain as an American how I feel about that. I mean, you could make the NPD illegal tomorrow. I would prefer to see the NPD fail in the battle of ideas rather than in the legal field. But look, as an American, I can't tell you what Germany should do. That's for Germans to decide. I believe that an open and honest and frank dialogue is critically important to weeding out these issues before they really become problematic. Why are there still Jews in Hungary? I don't know. I can't say. If I were a Jew in Hungary, would I stick around? I don't know. I feel very good knowing that Israel is there as an option for us.
Me too.
Knowing that we
Israel
will always
must survive.
It has to survive, and it will survive because it's more than our fallback. It's what will assure that something like the Shoah will never happen again.
Any other questions? Ma'am?
I had a question for Pia, actually, 2 questions, if I may. How has this experience changed you, if it has? And also, what do you intend to do when your year is up?
The second question is especially hard to answer right now, because right now it's the time to deal with it. What I want to do, I have a few ideas. Of course, my year now just made me a little more secure, probably, in what I want to do. Because talking to those people just gives another view of life. And I think what I really would like to do is working as a politician for changing something in the world. It's probably one of those very childish, it's not? Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But that's what I really would like to do. I don't know, probably talk a little differently after studying for a few years, but that's what I would like to do, because that's what I just see right now, that it's really important to learn from the past and to keeping the Holocaust in mind and to deal with the current and the issues from the present. So that's what I would really like to do.
Yes, please.
I want to make a remark following what this young lady said. Less than 15 years from now, there will be no survivors. And 25 years from now, there will be no survivors from what we call second circle flight cases, from the Barbarossa operation to Eastern Soviet Union and to the Central Asian republics, who were there, who suffered, who came back, and today they get help from, until a few years ago, only from Jewish organizations. Only recently, 3 or 4 years ago, the German government accepted its responsibility to provide home care and services for these people, whether there or in Israel or elsewhere. But this leads me to the question, not of the future of the ASF, what educational legacy shall we leave? Who will take care of it? What shape it will take? Because there have been many very successful attempts. I mean, the example of Germany is a shining example, not only of the public awareness of the individual phenomena. Take the Stolpersteine, almost 40,000 of them all over Germany. I shared this with the audience 2 days ago. 3 months ago, my brother and I went to Berlin and set Stolpersteine to our grandmother and her siblings. This is there to stay. And people who will leave that building, and or the kids who will go to school will look at it, and people who will be passerby will look at it and will ask, and the text is concise and very clear, no question. And this was something which was not imposed from up. It was an initiative of a gentleman from Cologne by the name of Lemnig. It has been emulated by thousands of cases, adopted by municipalities. But these things should, at the same time, we hear what happens in Hungary, and we hear what happens in other countries. So there were some very serious European attempts initiated by the Swedish Prime Minister in the year 2000. The International Task Force was established. It was for education. It has a secretariat in Berlin. Many other programs, there are many other programs, but time has come to coordinate these things or try to make sure that, first of all, they are standardized in the sense of regulations by government, in the sense that will not intervene in the contents, but will make sure that no graduates of high schools or universities will leave their institutions of learning without having any idea of the universal meaning of the Shoah, of what we call premeditated murder, and make no differentiation with Sinti and Roma, how the gypsies are called, and so on. So this is extremely important, and we don't have much time to do that. And I think eventually all the organizations which deal today with daycare or daily needs will have to set their mind, because they've got the will, they've got the experience, and the people like the 15 or 20,000 volunteers of the ASF are a fantastic asset in that respect, and you have such cases in other countries. So this is something to look for in the future, because if in 100 years there will be educated men who will not understand the meaning of what happened and not internalize its human values and lessons for humanity, so we have done very little. Thank you.
I think we're coming to the end of our time slot, and I think we have some refreshments for you as well. So from my end, I just want to close going back to my original question, which was, what is a good Irish boy doing in a dialogue like this? And I think that for me, I just want to say that my first experience with Germany was in the early 80s when I was an exchange student in high school, and there I was exposed to German Holocaust curriculum directly for the first time, and I saw an honest effort being made to engage with the past, and I was impressed by that. And as all these things are, they are never perfect and they are never complete, and it is an ongoing thing. I also reflect on my own past as an American, having grown up in the shadow of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement, and recognizing the issues that we have here internally, both around reconciliation and around social justice. And I think that I will say something that I know my German predecessors would probably be very hesitant to say, which is that I think, as imperfect as all human efforts are, and this being one of them, that it gives us something all as Americans to look at, and when we look at our own country and our own people and how we want to reach out to each other and across cultural boundaries and international boundaries. And so that's my last thought. And I think that then to close, I'd like to just briefly introduce one of our other partners here tonight, John Schweitzer, who is the acting director of the AJC here in Chicago, to say a final word.
Thanks, Mark. I wanted to say just how honored we are to partner with you on this, and how honored I am to be here. Certainly, I think everybody can draw a lot of conclusions coming out of this. For me, it's the profound nature of one-on-one relationships and how much that really matters. I saw it firsthand when I was chaperoning and being the AJC liaison for the group of Germans participating in the Konrad Adenauer Foundation's trip to the US this past year. And it was an amazing experience to witness their transformation over a course of a week in the US, talking to American Jews, some like myself, some survivors, and really being part of the Jewish community here in the United States. It certainly left a big mark on them, and it certainly affected me. And I see this type of thing in other aspects of the American Jewish Committee, especially with our Berlin office, which was the first American Jewish organization to go back into Germany with a permanent office. Our office is in Berlin, and everybody was talking about education. I wanted to share with you that just last week, AJC Berlin worked with the government in Germany to put a curriculum in place in Berlin schools. Over 400 Berlin schools will now have a curriculum devoted just to tolerance and respect. It's a democracy program called Hands for Kids, and it was born out of a program started here in the United States, and right now it will be available to all school children in Berlin. So that's what I've seen from AJC. And of course, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, the trip that our board member Phil Dunn has been on, and we have several other board members here who have an amazing legacy in this dialogue, in this reconciliation, Jerry Franks and Eva Lichtenberg, who are both here tonight. And I think they and you have all showed the importance of continuing this important work, how it's incumbent on all of us to take our experiences and share them and really be the difference that we hope to see in the world. And with that, I'll close, and I just want to thank once again the Action Reconciliation Service of Peace and our other partners for including the American Jewish Committee in this and being such a force for good throughout the world.
Thank you.